Well, yesterday there was some breaking news about, well, the news. The announcement from NBC that its chairman, Andy Lack, was getting pushed out, and it came at a time that was both a surprise to many at NBC itself and throughout the entire news business. But others are saying, what took so long? Lack was at the center of many of that network's controversies and embarrassments, from the Matt Lauer incident to suppressing the Ronan Farrow investigation on Harvey Weinstein. And oh, yeah, let's not forget that guy. He's the one that brought back Brian Williams and gave him his own show after he admitted to lying about his own stories. Now, check this out. This is rich. In an op-ed just a few days ago, Andy Lack himself wrote this: "In the last decade, the ugliest and most cunning threat to journalism comes from leaders in different parts of the world increasingly questioning not just the veracity of what is being reported, which isn't new, but the integrity of those who report it." That's rich. Now, he was talking about the coronavirus and the coverage of this, but you got to wonder, the leaders questioning the integrity of those who report on the news. It sounds like maybe that he is one of those leaders questioning how his own reporter covered the Weinstein scandal. I wonder if that's what he was talking about. I think we can all pretty much call that a double standard, attacking the people who attack the press while turning a blind eye to what's happening inside their own organization and the coverage of that. To help break this all down, we welcome in the media reporter for The Hill, Joe Concha, and brand journalist and former CNN anchor, Heidi Collins. Welcome, guys.
Hey, Sean,
hi, guys.
How are you?
All right, so let's just go over this for a second, because I think it's really important. When Andy Lack got pushed out, it was largely because his own network revolted about how they had handled these scandals, and the fact that when a reporter, Ronan Farrow, who worked for that network, MSNBC, was going to publish something in his book about how NBC had handled Lauer and Weinstein, Lack himself comes out and says, not true, that's not true. So he goes out and attacks his own guy. It's funny how he talks about how attacks on reporters are bad, unless it's him doing the attacking, right, Joe?
Look, with Andy Lack, that's the whole ballgame, Sean, as far as the suppression of that story by Ronan Farrow. And think about this. Ronan Farrow, if he wasn't in a position where he can go to another publication, in this case, go to the New Yorker and print out and publish his findings, which only won him, a Pulitzer. So clearly he had the goods. And Lack and Noah Oppenheim, who was still at NBC, said that, no, it wasn't ready for publication. It didn't pass our vetting process, like the many things that we hear on Lawrence O'Donnell or Rachel Maddow's show every night. So, I'd love to hear what that vetting process is exactly. So, in terms of Lack, he has his own personal problems as well. The New York Attorney General is now investigating sexual harassment claims against him. Ironically enough, he was the guy who was at the helm with Matt Lauer, and we all know what happened there and all the years that went on for. So, as far as Andy Lack, let's put it this way. My sources at NBC, many producers and people that work there, are not exactly sad that Andy Lack is gone, because his tenure was one marked with many, many errors, and from an ethics perspective, very, very lacking, for lack of a better term.
Heidi, when you were an anchor, were there ever times when the boss comes down and says, I know you got the story, but we can't go with it, and you knew it was because they didn't like the angle it was going in or what it would expose, maybe that wouldn't look good on themselves?
No, I mean, I have to be honest. We've never had that kind of thing happen, and I'm not really sure where that comes from. I can only speak for myself and say that never happened to me. But what I loved about what I saw in Andy's comment that really struck me is it was almost like he was saying, "How dare you question the integrity of a journalist?" Well, I mean, that's exactly what we are expected to be held up to by way of standards. We have very powerful positions, influential positions, and we really serve the public when we do the news gathering, when we choose what types of questions to ask, when we put our final pieces together. Of course, the integrity of a journalist should be questioned, and should be questioned often. It's just part of the job.
Heidi, as we saw some of these reports come out yesterday about Lack, it seemed, as I would read through them, they were almost clinical. There wasn't that much information about the background or why he might be being fired. It was just about the transition. Do you think reporters are afraid to write on NBC?
Well, I mean, that wouldn't surprise me either. Journalists are human too, and everybody wants to protect their job and everybody wants to be safe. But I would just throw this out there. There's some very basic ideas when it comes to being a journalist by way of code of ethics. And there's four, like the Society of Professional Journalists, for example, has four really low level things that we all need to abide by. And they are seeking the truth and reporting it, being accountable and transparent, minimizing harm, and then acting independently. So when you ask that question, Lindsay, it makes me think about, wow, not only do we have to be responsible for what we're reporting and put our names on it, we also have to be prepared to walk away if that said organization we're working for really doesn't align with the truth and genuinely seeking the truth at all times.
Yeah. Hey, Joe, there's been a lot of talk about the coverage of Joe Biden and the Tara Reade story. Let me play a little back and forth from Ronnie McDaniel, who was on This Week with Martha Raddatz about this.
We've seen Joe Biden hiding. He hasn't been vetted. People haven't seen the 2020 version of Joe Biden, who's shifted so far left on many of his policies. And then this week, we've seen him really be challenged for the first time in 5 weeks on allegations that many in the media have ignored. And finally, those are coming to light.
I know we here at ABC have not ignored, and many in the media have not ignored it.
Joe, that is patently false. We've put it on this show. He did 9 interviews over the course of, a month, 77 questions, and not once asked of this. So one of them was on that very show. How does she get away with saying something like that?
Fact check, not true, right? Because that's a very good question, Sean. I mean, in other words, if there's a bunch of media reporters out there, I'm a media reporter, there's a whole army over at CNN, there's plenty of Gabe Sherman is at NBC as far as being a media reporter. How do you say something like that, saying ABC has covered this, other news organizations have covered this, when Tara Reade made these allegations March 25th? And as you said, Joe Biden did interview after interview, local and national, on all the broadcast networks, on CNN, on MSNBC, and was never asked about it even once. Then you compare that to, the obvious comparison is to Brett Kavanaugh in 2018. And when a Julie Swetnick, for instance, remember who Swetnick was? She said that Brett Kavanaugh was at parties where gang rapes were going on that she kept going back to, which was kind of odd. She's at the University of Maryland. She's going back to high school parties where there's gang rapes going on. That's interesting. So she hires Michael Avenatti, who was touted as a presidential candidate. He's now president of his cell block. But the point is that, okay, you got Avenatti representing you, and you're making up these sort of salacious claims that turned the whole Kavanaugh hearings around. And Swetnick was on 3 national television shows that night being asked about it. So we talk about vetting. We talk about going through a whole process. Tara Reade, she hasn't even been invited by CNN or MSNBC to be interviewed. How are you not curious? How is there not one good journalist there that says, you know what, I'd like to break some news today, unless they're being told, do not book her. We don't want to give her the time of day. She was supposed to do Fox News, I think, a couple of days ago, and something fell apart there. But the point is that, yes, she should be asked questions, obviously. She should be given a platform, just like Kavanaugh accusers were. And at the same time, Joe Biden, it shouldn't have taken 5 weeks for him to get one question in terms of the allegations against him, because he deserves due process and to be heard as well. Then again, he didn't exactly offer up any information either. So yeah, there you go, Sean.
Well, Heidi, we're out of time, but I want to ask you this real quick. The New York Times is calling for the DNC to do an investigation on Joe Biden and the allegations against him. Do you think the DNC, yes or no, should be the people to do the investigation?
No, absolutely not. Absolutely not. I mean, this has to be an independent investigation. And since when is the DNC a true investigative body?
I couldn't agree more. We're going to talk. Thank you guys so much for being here. Appreciate your insights. And when Sean and I come back, we're going to break down all that we've been talking about when we return.